With that feedback you've been getting then, have you had feedback about excessive testing requirements for the same area of competence? And the example that's been cited to me is that, for example, there's basically an instrument rating now required on each type, including if you do an NVG assessment, even if the night before or the day before you had done an instrument rating on a particular type, you had to repeat that competency during the NVG assessment. And there's comment, and this is about the third lot I've had of this, that there's a lot of overlap of currency or competence testing. Is that an area of feedback that you're aware of, and what are your plans to address that?
Yeah, so it certainly is an area of the feedback that we've been getting, Senator. It's not specifically on NVG, but there's a number of areas of competencies and ratings and examinations and understanding exactly what's required. So I think it's an interpretation, and we've got to clarify that interpretation and assist people. I have currently I'll call it a Tiger team, a Part 61 Tiger team, which is a cross-divisional team who have actually got together, and we have Roger as providing the leadership for that to understand the implications and try and get better information out for everyone. So writing fact sheets, writing information, putting the information up on the web.
Okay. Previous iterations of reg reform, the inability of a lot of frontline FOIs and other people to explain what the changes are was reflective of very short timeframes between the issuing of the instructions and industry seeking to implement them. Just wondering if you could assure us that there is a more thorough plan in terms of equipping your own people to be informed enough to work constructively with industry as you roll out these reforms.
In regards to any regulations that we are going to implement, there will be a plan put in place to not only inform the aviation community but educate my own people in regards to the regulation.
Okay, in terms of the workload for that, I've had some concern that there's already an inability of the number of staff to issue air transport pilot licences for helicopter pilots, and that when Part 133 comes in conjunction with Parts 91 and 138, there's a deep concern that CASA won't actually have enough people, even if the ones they've got are adequately trained. Do you have a view on the capacity of the organisation to handle this process of reform and implementation?
It's a very good question, Senator. More than happy to have more people, but I don't think I'll get them. But the situation we've got at the moment, I've actually going around the country with a forum to actually engage and consult with the aviation community on the regulations that we have remaining, the 12 regulations, and try and understand the timeline that's associated with that so we can best work with the industry to say, if we're going to implement these regulations, what's a good timeline to implement them, because I know there's going to be impact on the aviation community as much as the resource implication on myself. So once I've been able to set a timeline with industry, we'll then look at the implications internally in CASA, and there is work already underway in my operations and standards branch to look at that workload.
Sure. Chair's giving me a hurry up here, so I'm going to ask 3 more questions and try and complete this in about 3 or 4 minutes if I can. Changing topics completely to unmanned systems, you're aware of the recent decision of the FAA to require all operators of unmanned systems to register those because of the concern they've had that even the smaller than 2 kilogram type operations, which at the moment I don't believe CASA intends to be engaged with, have come so close to causing accidents they don't believe they can prevent accidents just through education. Do you have any similar concerns here or intent to try and influence the operation of sub 2 kilogram systems?
I think it's fair to say that the remotely piloted aircraft systems is one of my risk areas, and it's certainly one that we're focused on to understand the implications of all of those systems and how best we can actually put regulations in place to mitigate the concerns that are there. We're reviewing our CASA 101, which is our unmanned aerial vehicle regulation at the moment, to make a consideration to see how best we can actually frame it. It was established in 2001, that's certainly a long time ago, and things have changed since then. So there's work we need to do, and we need to understand the actual implications across all of the remotely piloted aircraft systems and how best to implement them. In regards to what the FAA is doing, I think it's fair to say that we'll look at all the regulators out there and see what everyone's doing in regards to the remotely piloted aircraft space and see how best we can implement that in Australia.
Okay, may come back and ask for some specific updates in another forum on that one. Just coming back to your regulatory philosophy, you're saying that CASA is committed to maintaining the trust of the Australian aviation community. One of the biggest breaches of trust recently was the ATSB investigation into the Pellier report, where CASA maintained that the internal investigation, the Chambers report, the fatigue risk management report and the special audit were not necessarily pertinent. I think the term was they were a private internal report. Now that ATSB have reopened that investigation, could you assure the committee that it's your intention to share all of that information about the inadequacies of CASA's oversight at the time with the team, so that the new report reflects not just the actions of the pilot but the inadequate supervision of the organisation and the self-identified inadequacies of CASA at the time?
I think it's fair to say, Senator, that we've provided all the information that the ATSB has requested of us, and we will take into account any recommendations that come out of the investigation.
So would it be your view that a report like the Chambers report should have been provided to ATSB voluntarily?
I wasn't there at the time, Senator. It's very unfair for me to be
That
making a
is probably an
statement
unfair
about an
question.
organisation of the
I
past.
think if I may, Senator, if I may come in, one of the significant amendments we've made to the MOU with the ATSB is to put beyond doubt the kind of information that can and should be provided on request or sometimes voluntarily. As you may recall, Senator, the existence of the Chambers report was conveyed to the ATSB. The circumstances under which that happened probably weren't as concrete as they certainly will be in future.
Mr. Alec, I think you might recall Mr. Dolan found out about it 30 minutes before he appeared before the Senate committee, because he'd overheard the evidence where we had dug it out of half a truckload of cardboard boxes that CASA had dumped on our doorstep. I don't accept the contention that they knew about it before the report was issued. In fact, the Canadian peer review confirms that was not the case.
Well, I won't challenge that, Senator, except to say that I believe the former director gave evidence that he had mentioned this to Mr. Dolan. Now, he might not have mentioned it by the Chambers report, because that was a term that sort of came into existence afterwards. But I think the information about some inquiry having been made internally had been conveyed. But I guess the major point is that that kind of thing should not happen again under the new arrangements.
Okay, very pleased to hear that. And final question before the Chair gives me a hard time. You've said also in this point 2 in your regulatory philosophy that where reasonable alternative approaches to the fulfilment of a regulatory requirement can satisfy legal requirements and do not unacceptably compromise safety, that you'll consider it and look at that. I draw you back to a conversation we've had previously about pilots who have a colour vision deficiency. The fact that previously CASA allowed an alternate approach, which was an individual assessment of competence and capacity to operate a particular aircraft type by night. And as a result of that, we've had 25 years of safe operations, single pilot, multi-crew, RPT, you name it. Currently, CASA has closed the door to that. Would you consider reopening that door in the light of your stated regulatory philosophy?
I have stated to those people involved, Senator, that I'm more than happy to look at empirical tests that is actually defining the variables and actually understand the implications in regards to the tested results themselves. And if they prove otherwise, then we'll look at those.
So that could include a practical test in the aircraft type that they were seeking approval to operate?
Well, currently, in regards to the regulations, as far as I'm aware, we specify the Ishihara test as the first level, the Farnsworth test as the second level, and then a third test. And currently we recommend the CAD test.
Okay. And what I'm saying to you is that we have demonstrated that there are pilots who have safely operated for more than a decade in a range of very challenging roles who have failed your third test, the CAD test. And I'm asking, would you consider allowing them to do what CASA has previously done, which is to do a practical flight test, or now possibly in a simulator, to demonstrate what they are individually capable of in a real scenario?
Just say yes. Come on, we've got to get on with it. Bloody bureaucratic blabber.
I would just have to consider all the situations involved and understand the implications in regards to that. But given we consider it an acceptable means of compliance, then I should look at it, yes.
Senator
Thank you.
Williams, you got two
Thank you,
questions.
Mr Skidmore. Last budget estimates, I raised the cost